Hi everyone, welcome to our PT Plus online lessons. Now the main topic for today's lesson is Read Aloud, where we will be introducing this question type together with some of the key information that you absolutely must know when you are studying and preparing for the exam and for Read Aloud. So let's get started. Now, firstly, you would know that the first part of your exam is speaking and writing, okay? And in this part of the test, the first section is actually a personal introduction section that goes for about 1 minute. Now, do note that this introduction section is not scored, so it does not affect your score in the end. Right. Now, after personal introduction, that's when you go into these speaking question types that are scored. So you've got these 5 speaking question types, and Read Aloud is the very first one that you will face. And because it's the first one that you'll need to do, it does set your pace and also your confidence for the rest of the exam too. So it's quite important for us to want to do well in Read Aloud. Okay, so let's also look at how much Read Aloud is worth in total in the exam. Okay, this is definitely something you need to be very, very familiar with. So firstly, one Read Aloud question is worth 12 to 13 marks. And in the exam, you may face 6 to 7 Read Aloud questions. This number is randomly generated before you start the exam. So now, in total, Read Aloud is worth between 72 to 91 marks. And if you look at it in comparison to the whole speaking section, that is quite a big chunk of marks, right? That is about 20 to 21% of your speaking score in total. So 1/5 of your speaking score comes from Read Aloud. So that really shows how important Read Aloud is to your speaking score. But Read Aloud also affects your reading score as well, not just speaking. And it affects reading, okay, up to 30%. Up to 30% of your reading score is derived from Read Aloud. So this just shows how important a part Read Aloud plays in your entire exam. And it is extremely important for you to be very familiar with this rank of importance for every single question type in the entire exam, because this shows and this determines the amount of time and effort you should be putting into these different question types. And if you're putting your time and effort into the question types that are worth more, then you're going to see a quicker or larger increase in your scores. Okay. So now that we understand how important Read Aloud is to your entire PT exam, let's have a look at what this task requires. And we'll first have a look at the official question type introduction video from official Pearson PTE Academic.
Read aloud. For this item type, you need to read a written text aloud. The recording status box shows a countdown. You have 30 to 40 seconds to prepare depending on the length of the passage. You hear a short tone. After the tone, start speaking immediately.
The climate for doing business improved in Egypt more than in any other country last year, according to a global study that revealed a wave of company.
Do not start speaking before the tone because your voice will not be recorded. Finish speaking before the progress bar reaches the end and the word recording changes to completed.
This is roughly what the exam interface will look like, and there are a few things that I'd like to emphasize for you here. Now, firstly, as you saw before, you'll have 30 to 40 seconds of preparation time to basically prepare yourself to read this passage out loud. And in this status box over here, your preparation time will be counting down, so you can keep track of it here. Now, on the top right-hand corner, you'll be able to see 2 things. The first one is the question number that you're on, and the other one is an overall timer for the entire speaking section. Okay, now with this timer itself, you don't have to worry too much about it because as you can see, each little part of every single question, such as your preparation time and your recording time, each of these are timed individually anyway. So for the speaking and the writing section, you don't have to worry too much about this overall timer. Okay, now after the preparation time finishes, you'll actually hear a beep. Okay, and that's when the microphone will open, and then you'll need to start reading this text out loud into the microphone, and you'll have 30 to 40 seconds to finish reading and recording this passage. Okay, now a few things to take note of. The first one is that you need to make sure you speak within 3 seconds of when the microphone opens. Now, if the microphone opens, beep, and for 3 seconds you do not make any sound, the microphone will actually automatically close. So it's very important for you to begin speaking and reading this text out loud within 3 seconds of the microphone opening. So we would suggest for you to beep and then take a deep breath and then begin to read this text. Okay, now the second thing also is, let's say you finish reading this paragraph, but you still have some time left. Okay, what you want to make sure you do is you click on the next button immediately so that the microphone closes and you move to the next question. Because if you don't actually click next, when you're done with the passage, your microphone is still open, but you are no longer speaking. In an exam environment, there may be many other students around you and it can get quite loud. And it is possible for other students' speaking to be recorded into your question because you aren't actually speaking into the microphone either. Okay, so to avoid that, definitely make sure that after you finish reading this text, you click on next and move to the next question immediately. Okay, now for read aloud and each question, you are tested on 3 criteria. Okay, and the machine looks at these 3 things: content, pronunciation, and oral fluency. Now, I'll go through what each of these roughly require first, but we do have videos that dive deep into each of these criteria and explain the techniques and skills for each of them. But first, let's give you a rough idea of what is expected. For content, it is worth 2 to 3 marks, just depending on how long the passage is. And basically, it requires you to read the passage or the text accurately and correctly. So just reading it as it is and not adding words or missing out on words. So that's one thing. The other thing is also it requires you to be speaking clearly because the machine needs to recognize what you're saying in order to give you the content mark. Okay, so in this sense, content is a little bit related to your pronunciation. Okay, and pronunciation is worth 5 marks, and it basically involves 2 main things. Firstly, that your pronunciation of your sounds are clear and correct and accurate. Okay, and the second thing is that you're placing your stress in your words and sentences correctly. Now remember that we do have videos that dive deep into the techniques and skills required to achieve high scores on pronunciation. So make sure you watch those as well. Okay, and for fluency, basically this requires you to have fluent speech, which means that you are delivering and reading the text in meaningful chunks. So this is what it means by phrasing. And at the same time, your overall speech is smooth, it's rhythmic, and it also has an acceptable speed. Now remember, in our videos, we will also break down what each of these really mean and how you can achieve it. Okay, so before we go into those videos, we're going to have a look at. Now, let's finish off with some tips provided by official PTE Academic. And the first one is to use punctuation to help you decide where to pause when you read. And you can see here that they stress that you should be breaking the text up into meaningful chunks. So doing this phrasing. And punctuation is your guide as to how you can break it up. Okay, and using this punctuation at these break points, you can make a tiny pause, and this pausing will be allowing you to read more fluently, because then you'll have time to control your pace. You will be able to let your eyes look ahead, and at the same time, you'll be able to be communicating the full meaning of the text because you're communicating it in logical chunks. Okay, so for example, over here, let me demonstrate what this will look like with meaningful and correct pausing. So make sure you pay attention to my pauses in this paragraph. Photography's gaze widened during the early years of the 20th century, and as the snapshot camera became increasingly popular, the making of photographs became increasingly available to a wide cross-section of the public. The British people grew accustomed to and were hungry for the photographic image. So as you can see, my pausing actually breaks the text up into meaningful chunks that allow the listener to then absorb this information bit by bit. And at the same time, my pausing actually allows me to, number one, breathe, right? And number two, it actually helps me control my pace and allows me to read the long passage smoothly throughout. So this is an extremely important tip that helps with your fluency. And actually, it is one of the techniques and skills that we explain in a lot of detail about how you can achieve this on Read Aloud and also in your speaking section in general for fluency. Now, the second tip is for pronunciation. And this is for you to stress the words that carry important information, okay, so that you can bring out the meaning in the text. So for example, when I say stress the words, right, I'm putting my stress on stress and words so that I'm delivering more meaning. Now, this is also a very key technique for both pronunciation and for fluency, and we dive in and explain this in full detail in our future videos as well. So make sure to look at those too. So that's it for this lesson, and I'll see you again next time on PTE Plus.